The gospel text of today is taken from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 9, verses 2 to 13, and is made up of two incidents, one of which follows the other. The first of these two incidents is the scene of the Transfiguration. It is very clear that the Transfiguration was an extremely important event in the life of Jesus, and this is so because all the three evangelists have narrated this event. In the Gospel of Mark, Jesus takes with him for the second time in the Gospel the three closest disciples, Peter, James, and John. And the reason why he takes them is because he wants to give at least this inner group an insight of what is going to come. And even as they go up to the mountain, Jesus is transfigured. The word transfigured is from the Greek metamorphosis, which means that there is a radiance about him, there is a movement about him, there is a change about him, which really cannot be rationalized. This is why when Peter experiences this change, he really doesn't know what to say. James and John, of course, do not speak in this incident, but Peter speaks, and his speech and his words are because he does not really understand. What does Peter want to do? Peter and James and John notice that there are two figures with Jesus. And the two figures are Elijah and Moses. The chronological order is Moses and Elijah because Moses was before Elijah. Then why does Mark deliberately have these figures narrated as Elijah and Moses, even though both Matthew and Luke will narrate the right chronological order? Mark has a reason which he explains in the second incident. Be that as it may, in the first incident, what we notice is that as soon as the cloud overshadows them, and the cloud for the second time in the Gospel of Mark, the voice from heaven speaks. And the voice says something different now. At the baptism, the voice said to Jesus specifically, "You are my beloved Son. In you I am well pleased." Now, the voice still refers to Jesus as beloved Son, but now the voice of God points Jesus out to the disciples as the agapetos, as the beloved Son. And the voice says, "This is my beloved Son," and add something, "Listen to him." In other words, the disciples are to listen to what Jesus is going to tell them because it is ordained by God. The second incident is that they come down from the mountain, and then the meaning of the transfiguration in Mark becomes clear, because when they are coming down from the mountain in Mark chapter 9, verses 9 to 13, the second part of our text of today, Jesus is asked the question not about Moses, but about Elijah. Now, Elijah, according to the book of Malachi, was the prophet who was to come before God. And that's why Mark has the order Elijah and Moses, because he wants to give more importance in this scene to Elijah than to Moses. And by bringing Elijah into the forefront, he brings the Messiah, Jesus himself, into the forefront. And so the question is this: why do people say that Elijah must come before the Messiah? And we know that in the Gospel of Mark very clearly, John the Baptist has been identified with Elijah. As a matter of fact, Mark goes through such great pains to identify John with Elijah that he describes his dress, he describes his food, he describes his proclamation only so that his readers will be able to realize that John is really that messenger, that precursor, that Elijah reincarnated, if you like. And so, very clearly, Elijah appears with Jesus. John the Baptist plays the role of Elijah, which means that Jesus is the Messiah. However, there is a note of sadness. There is a poignant note here because the people never listened to John. They did whatever they wanted. They heard from one ear and they let it go out the other. And that is what will happen also with the Messiah. So then, what is the Transfiguration saying to the disciples and to us? It is saying that though Jesus will be condemned, though he will be hung on the cross, though he will die on the cross and be buried, you must not forget the resurrection. So the Transfiguration now is an insight into the glory. If this is how inspired, how impressed the disciples are, imagine how much more they will be with the resurrection. The Transfiguration is only 100, if you can talk in terms of geometry, of what exactly the resurrection will be. And so the disciples are invited not to lose hope when things go awry, not to be afraid when Jesus goes to the cross. So Jesus gives them here a glimpse into his resurrection. We are given a glimpse not only into the resurrection of Jesus, but a glimpse into our own lives. There are times in our lives, especially at this time of the pandemic, when we are going through tremendous challenges. We are going through a lot of difficulties, and we begin to ask and wonder why God is doing this to us, whether we will ever have some respite from this challenge. The Transfiguration is saying to us that we will, not only that, it is saying that we will receive this consolation, and what we receive now will only be 100th of what God has prepared for us. It is inviting us not to lose hope. It is inviting us not to give in to despair. It is inviting us to keep trusting, and especially at those times when we are challenged, especially at those times when we have hurdles in front of us. We regard those hurdles not as obstacles, but as opportunities to be brave, to be strong, and to be faithful like Jesus was. If you were on the Mount of Transfiguration, what would you say to Jesus?